do me a favor and put in the chat that you can hear me. Make sure this microphone is on. So good to see you, everybody. Chuck Holton here, coming to you from Panama. And I was asked by CBN to get on and give you an update about what's going on here in Panama around the visit of the new Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. So he came down on his first overseas visit. It's the first time that a Secretary of State has made his first trip outside the United States to Latin America in more than 100 years. And it's appropriate because Marco Rubio is Cuban and speaks fluent Spanish, and so it makes sense that he would come here first. On his agenda, three big issues actually. Number one is the influence of China, not just here in Panama, but all across Latin America. Number two is immigration and what they can do to put a stop to that pipeline of people, sort of an unbroken conga line of migrants that's heading north into the United States. And the last thing is muffled. I'm going to turn this around a little bit. It's real windy out here, so I'm going to tell you what, let me just try this. I'll just take my microphone off and just use the iPhone mic. So maybe that'll do better. So the third thing he wants to check out is the economic issues in terms of making America more competitive in Latin America, because, you know, China has actually taken over a whole lot down in Latin America, and it's not really. Yeah, so I just changed it. It's unsynced. Okay, if the audio is unsynced, then you need to refresh the page on YouTube, and then it should sync back up for you. Okay, so refresh your page and it should be fine. If you're having problems like that with the chat or with the audio, sometimes you just hit refresh on your side and it'll fix those things. So now I lost my train of thought. Three things. Number one, influence of China across Latin America. Number two, immigration. Number three is how can the United States take a bigger piece of the pie economically here in Latin America. And he's going to 5 different countries, if I remember right. Panama first, then he goes to El Salvador, goes to Costa Rica, goes to Guatemala, and then goes to Dominican Republic, okay? And all of the topics he's going to be just talking to all of these people about are going to be very similar. But of course, here in Panama, we have this issue with the Panama Canal that a lot of people have been freaking out about. I mean, there's been it turned out to be a very popular refrain for Donald Trump to get up on a podium and talk about, we're going to take back the Panama Canal. And everybody went, yeah, because, you know, we did pay to build the thing. And people, ever since Jimmy Carter signed the treaty that turned the canal over to Panama, he signed the treaty in 1977, and they turned it over in 1999. So let's talk about what happened in that 22 years in just a minute. But ever since that happened, Americans have been sort of chagrined over the fact that we gave this beautiful piece of land back to Panama, and Panama has been running it. Now, since Panama took over the canal, they have expanded the canal, they've widened it, they've created more locks, they've put a lot of work into it. The traffic on the canal is more than double what it was when they took it over in 1999. They have put about $10 billion into the canal and the things around the canal. Okay, so they put a lot into it, okay? They put a lot of effort, a lot of money, a lot of time into the canal since they got it back. And nevertheless, there's still a lot of people in America who that's a very visceral thing for them. If you're like me, you're old enough to remember when we turned it over to Panama, and we all thought it was a bad idea. Now, it wasn't just Jimmy Carter that made the decision to do that. It was also a whole bunch of senators, like 90-something senators, and that voted for it to give it to Panama. And I'm going to take you back, and we're going to talk just a little bit about the history of that for just a second before we get to where we are today, because I think it helps to give you context. That's the point of these long-form live videos that we do here on CBN News, is to give you more context. Because when you're watching the soundbite news, when you're watching the evening news or whatever, you're getting 2-3 minutes of each topic, and it's really not enough to give you a good sense of the history and why something is happening. They can tell you what's happening, but understanding the why is very important. So if we go back to 1977, what was it that caused Jimmy Carter to decide to turn the canal over to Panama? Well, first of all, it was not a profitable endeavor for the United States. The U.S. all the numbers I'm going to give you are numbers in today's dollars, so it's all on an even playing field here. But in today's dollars, the United States invested about $10 billion in the canal, in building the canal, okay? And in the 85 years that the United States ran the canal after it was built, we never turned a profit. I mean, we never made that money back. And so it wasn't exactly a moneymaker for us. And it really was a hassle. It was a thorn in the side for us, because we had to maintain that 10-mile wide strip of land called the Canal Zone, and all of the Zonians who lived there who were American citizens, and that caused a lot of friction with Panama. And there was an increasing amount of friction that was being caused by the Panamanians, who were angry that the United States were still there. And so there were protests and riots, and they got pretty violent at times. At one point, there were even a bunch of Panamanians who were killed trying to post a Panamanian flag on what was American soil in the Canal Zone. And so because of that, it seemed, I think, to Jimmy Carter that we'd run this thing for 85 years, and it really wasn't a big profit center for us, and it was a big political hassle, so let's just give it back to him. And like I say, a bunch of senators and congressmen voted to ratify that treaty, and including Joe Biden at the time. That's how long Joe Biden has been in American politics. It goes all the way back to 77. So when Panama took it over, they immediately started to change things. They raised the prices. They started making some more changes, running it more like a business and less like a public service, I guess. And in so doing, Panama has made this thing quite profitable. And out of those profits, they have maintained the canal, they have expanded the canal, and they have made it available to everybody on Earth. Now, part of that deal was that the canal would be essentially like Switzerland. It would be nonpartisan. It would not belong to any major power, and it would be available to everybody, even in times of war. But especially, it would be available to the United States. And so the U.S. maintained the ability to, like, guarantee the military safety, guarantee the security of the canal militarily. So if there was a threat to the canal, the United States had and still has the ability to come in with their military and to secure the canal. And that's what brings us to where we are today. Donald Trump, didn't make a big deal out of this in the first term, his first term in office. As a matter of fact, the Obama appointed ambassador to Panama that stayed on after Trump took office the first time got sideways with Trump and said, I'm not going to work for Donald Trump, and he quit. And Trump never replaced him. He never appointed another ambassador to Panama. So Panama has not had an ambassador until now, all the way up until now. They never appointed a new one. And so they've just had an acting ambassador all this time. Well, so you have to understand, this is something that became, no, Rubio's not an ambassador. Rubio is the Secretary of State. Okay, let's stay on top. So this became an issue during the end of the election cycle back in November, when Trump first started talking about it, and he realized, hey, this polls very well. This is really popular with my base. And so he started banging that drum and saying, we're going to retake the Panama Canal. We're going to retake the Panama Canal. We're going to take over the Panama Canal. Well, listen, I don't think he ever had a thought that the United States was going to send troops down here and invade Panama and take over the Panama Canal militarily. Because number one, if you look at Trump's history, Trump doesn't like to do things militarily. He likes to do things diplomatically through business negotiations, right? But he also is very good at anchoring the conversation way out beyond where people expected him to by making very inflammatory or aggressive claims, and then, that shakes everybody up and gets them thinking maybe out of the box a little bit. And that's what he did in terms of Panama. He said, we're going to take back the canal. Well, now the question becomes, what did he actually mean by that? Because I took part in the last U.S. invasion of Panama. It happened December 20th, 1989. And on December 20th, 1989, I was a 19-year-old Army Ranger, and I parachuted into Panama down at Rio Hato, which is about 20 miles that way. And we took over the entire country and kicked out a dictator who had not been elected. He had just taken power, named Emmanuel Noriega. We arrested Noriega, took him back to stand trial in the United States, and he was in prison in the United States for a little more than 20 years. So I wish that at that time we had had a Marco Rubio. Now, I don't know if a guy like Marco Rubio could have come down and talked Emmanuel Noriega into honoring the results of the election, which they had an election back then, and in 1989, and or 88, I guess, and he didn't honor it because he didn't win. So Guillermo Endara was the guy who won, and they attacked him, and basically he, had to go into exile for a bit. So I don't know if Marco Rubio could have gotten this job done, or if Donald Trump could have gotten this job done. But as far as back then getting Emmanuel Noriega to step down, he hasn't been successful so far at getting Nicolas Maduro to step down. And they're in a very similar situation right now in Venezuela, because they just had an election in Venezuela, and they basically have proof that a different guy won, but Nicolas Maduro says, yeah, I'm not leaving. And so he's stayed in office, and they've driven the legitimate winner of the presidency into exile out of the country. Donald Trump, along with Joe Biden, they don't recognize Nicolas Maduro as a legitimate president. They recognize the other guy. However, they haven't sent the Army Rangers down there yet to jump into Venezuela and install the elected president in Venezuela. But that's what we did in 1989. Now, this time, Donald Trump started talking about, we're going to take back control of the canal. Now, the question is, was he talking literally or was he talking figuratively? And I think we got a hint of that from what happened when Marco Rubio came here just over the weekend. So Rubio came down. He met with the current president of Panama. His name is President Molino, okay? And Jose Raul Molino had been saying to everybody since Donald Trump started making these claims, you're not getting, the United States is not getting the canal back. They can't have it. This is sovereign Panamanian territory, and we're not going to give it back. And so it seemed like we were heading for a clash. As a matter of fact, Politico wrote this, in my opinion, very irresponsible article about what would happen if the United States came down and invaded Panama militarily again. And basically it said it would be incredibly bloody and we would massacre all the people and all this stuff. Well, we didn't massacre all the people the last time when Panama actually had an army. Panama doesn't have an army anymore. That was part of the treaty that they signed. They agreed when they took over the canal to get rid of their army and not have an army, to be like Switzerland. They're a neutral country, okay? So when Politico put out that article, it just got everybody's kind of hair on fire, and they were saying, "Oh my goodness, we're going to be, you know, at war with Panama." Well, no, it's not going to happen. Trump, I don't believe, meant it that way, and the reason I say that is because that's what Marco Rubio said when he got here. Marco Rubio did a masterful job of playing the good cop to Trump's bad cop. He came down to Panama, he met with the Panamanian president, and he said, look, we got a problem with the fact that China has so much sway over your country. Because back in 2017, the previous president, named President Varela, signed a memorandum with, or signed a deal with China to sign on to their Belt and Road Initiative. Now, if you don't know what the Belt and Road Initiative is, it's basically China trying to expand its political influence around the world through economic means, okay? And actually, it's essentially what the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, does for the United States. China's Belt and Road Initiative goes around the world and essentially gives credit cards, Chinese credit cards, to all these little countries like this, and says, hey, you need to build a bridge, you need to build a road, you need to build whatever, build it on us. And we'll give you great rates on this loan, but you know, the only thing we ask is that you don't recognize Taiwan as a independent country. Okay, now Panama was the first country on earth to recognize Taiwan as an independent country up until 2017. And in 2017, Xi Jinping came, President Xi from China came to Panama and met with then President Varela and basically handed him a Chinese credit card and said, build as much as you want to build and we'll give you a great deal on the rates. But all we ask is that you don't recognize Taiwan anymore. They had a Taiwanese embassy here with diplomats and everything. And Varela threw them under the bus for the money. So he threw the Taiwanese out, sent them packing. They stopped recognizing Taiwan as a legitimate country, and they recognized China as the legitimate owner of Taiwan. In doing that, they were able to get about $5 billion in loan guarantees from the Chinese, and they used it to build some bridges across the canal and some roads and a metro system, among other things. It also, you know, everybody's worried about the ports that a Chinese, a Hong Kong company, which is definitely too close to the CCP, no question about that, manages both of the ports on either end of the canal. Now, the ports and the canal are two separate things. To say that the ports control the canal would be like if there's a Burger King out in front of a Target in your city. That'd be like saying that Burger King owns that Target because they have a Burger King in the parking lot. That's not true. Just because there's a Burger King in the parking lot doesn't mean that Burger King owns everything that's in that parking lot, okay? And so those ports on either end of the canal, they don't control the canal. What they do is they unload and offload cargo. That's it. And that cargo sometimes gets put on a train or sometimes it's sent out to another ship or whatever, but they have a big cargo facility there with cranes and all that stuff. But they don't have a gate that could close the canal. They don't have a way to stop the canal from functioning any more than the Burger King in the parking lot could stop the Target behind it from functioning, okay? So somebody's saying, tell them the truth. You're not even listening to me. You're not even listening to what I'm saying. So I'm not going to even justify that with an answer. So because this Chinese company controls the ports on either end of the canal, they are but more than the ports, it's everything else. It's China's lending all this money to the Panamanian government because the Panamanian government runs the canal. And so it's the loans that are a bigger concern than the ports. I'm just telling you, that's the way it is. You might not believe me, but I'm telling you, that's the big problem. Those loans make, I mean, if you read the Bible, you know that the borrower is a slave to the lender. And China's goal in spreading these loans around the world is to make these small countries slaves to China. Now, people are saying, well, then just who raises and lowers the locks? Well, it's not the ports. There are 11,000 employees who work for the canal, and virtually every single one of them are Panamanian citizens. There are no Chinese working on the canal itself. By the Panamanian Constitution that was rewritten in 1991, the canal itself must be run by Panama exclusively. No one else can run the canal except Panama. That's what the Constitution of Panama says. And so they don't hire Chinese to run the canal. As a matter of fact, they don't even let Chinese ships into the canal without a Panamanian driving that ship. So they won't let ships drive themselves through the canal. When a ship comes and wants to go through the canal, a Panamanian canal pilot has to go out and get on that ship and take control of the ship, and he pilots it through the canal and then turns it back over to the captain of the ship. Okay? Somebody said, why are all the signs in Chinese? Well, I have to say, Donald Trump said that 70% of the signs around the canal are in Chinese. I live here. I can tell you that's just not true. Probably 7% of the signs are in Chinese, but there are some signs that are in Chinese. And everybody here thought that was a problem, without a doubt, even before Donald Trump started saying something about it. And they have since got rid of those. But there's a Chinese development bank here in a big building in Panama City. And that Chinese development bank is what is making these deals with the Panamanian government. And it's those debts, it's those loans that are the big concern. So when Marco Rubio came here, what he said was he went into a meeting with President Molino, and when President Molino came out of that meeting, the first thing he said, he did not say, okay, we're going to turn the canal over to the Americans. Nope. As a matter of fact, he said just the opposite. He said the canal will remain in Panamanian hands. Okay? But what he said, the very first thing was, we are going to pull out of the Belt and Road Initiative. We are no longer going to be a part of that program by China that is meant to make debtors, it's called debt trap diplomacy, okay, to make debtors out of our country. And you know what? Panamanians are happy about that. That's great, because they don't want to be a slave to China. They know that that's a threat. Okay, that is a problem. So they immediately are going to look for ways to get out of the Belt and Road Initiative as soon as possible. That was number one. Number two, Marco Rubio went out and visited an American company that's a power plant. They provide electricity, and they provide 36% of Panama's electricity. It's the first natural gas-fired power plant in Latin America. And it's out on the Colón side, on the Caribbean side of Panama. So he went out there to see that. That's an American company that is, that American company is headquartered in Alexandria, Virginia. And the reason he went out there was because he wanted to talk to Panama about, hey, let's do more of this. Let's make some more business deals between American companies and Panama. And look, you got this great, nice, bright, shiny power plant here that does a great job providing clean energy for your country. Let's have some more of this. And so Mulino agreed to that. Like, we're going to have more investment from the United States. Now, incidentally, you might have heard Donald Trump say in his inauguration speech, I think it was an inauguration speech, one of those speeches, that Panama had asked for $3.5 billion to fix the Panama Canal. I have to, just being honest with you, that is patently untrue. Panama never asked for money from the United States to fix the Panama Canal. Panama makes plenty of money on the canal that they use to fix the canal themselves. When it needs maintenance, they do their own maintenance. When it needs expanding, they paid for the expanding. The United States did not do that. The $3.5 billion that Trump was likely referring to was what they call foreign direct investment. Now, this is important for you to understand, because foreign direct investment is not direct investment by the government of the United States in Panama. The United States government is not spending U.S. taxpayer dollars on Panama as aid, okay, or something like that, okay? And so the Jackal says that them being a part of the Belt and Road Initiative was a violation of the treaty. Well, that's the argument that the United States is making, and intelligent people could disagree on that, and some people here disagree, some people here agree, whatever. That's the whole point. That's the reason why Marco Rubio came down, and Marco Rubio did a great job of not coming in and beating Panamanians over the head, because there's no need to do that. He's a diplomat. He came in and translated what Donald Trump said into diplomatic language that the politicians here in Panama could understand, that was palatable to them, and it actually made sense to them. So he got the job done. And so they've agreed for more foreign direct investment in Panama. Now, foreign direct investment is like if you decided to come to Panama and start a tour company. That's what I did. I came to Panama 13 years ago, and we live in this beautiful valley. I want to turn the camera around just for a second and show you just the incredible view here. This valley is so beautiful. It's just gorgeous. And that's my front yard. That's the view from the front yard there. And so we decided to start a tour company and do like jungle mountain tours up into those mountains back there that you see off in the distance. And there's a bunch of beautiful waterfalls and things out there. So we thought, yeah, this would be a great kind of a self-perpetuating pastime, you know, just a self-supporting hobby. So we bought a little side-by-side, and we started selling tickets, and we take people out in the mountains and do tours with them. Well, that business that I started, which we subsequently got, we closed down, but that qualifies as foreign direct investment. It's when a foreigner comes to Panama and invests foreign money that he made in a business that helps the Panamanian economy grow. That's foreign direct investment. So if you come to Panama and start a subway, that's foreign direct investment, okay? If an engineering company comes down here and gets a contract with the canal to help with designing the new locks on the canal, which they did, that's foreign direct investment. That's good for America because it creates jobs for Americans, and it's good for Panama. But that is not the U.S. government investing in Panama in any way, shape, or form. There's no U.S. taxpayer dollars involved, right? So when Trump said we put they asked for $3.5 billion to fix the canal, that is actually incorrect. The Panamanians did not do that. That didn't happen. But likely what he was referring to was that $3.5 billion of foreign direct investment that has been made in Panama. And Marco Rubio came here to make sure that we can get more foreign direct investment from the United States into Panama, right? Okay? So that's a good thing for America, and it's a good thing for Panama. Win-win. Now, the last thing that he came here to talk about was immigration, because we got, well, there were about, over 1 million refugees in the last year of the Biden administration who came through Panama on their way to the United States. They were getting about 5,000 people a day that were trekking across the Darien Gap, through the mud, over the mountains. The mountains in the Darien Gap look a lot like those mountains off in the distance there. But it rains a lot more down there. And no, there's not a water shortage here anymore, Maximus. There was last year, but there's not anymore. So what these migrants were doing is they were coming from Colombia, walking through the Darien Gap, that jungle area between the two countries, into Panama, and then Panama didn't want them, so they put them on buses and sent them to the United States, all the way up through Latin America. That obviously is a huge problem for the United States, because the migrants who came through Panama were the migrants that the Americans are the most concerned about, because they are from Somalia and Yemen and Syria and Afghanistan and Cuba and Venezuela and Haiti, okay? These countries that are essentially failed states. The people there, many of them grew up in a place that's just not civilized, and so they don't know what civilization is supposed to look like. So when they get to the United States, they tend to have a lot of problems, you know, getting into they don't just become model Americans overnight. And they put a big burden on the United States, and there's a lot of potential terrorism suspects that could come through Panama on their way to the U.S. And Panama wanted help putting a stop to it, and the Biden administration wouldn't help them. As a matter of fact, the only thing that Secretary Mayorkas did when he came to Panama was to take steps to make it cheaper, faster, safer, and easier for these migrants to come through Panama on their way to the United States. So President Molino actually got elected on the back of our reporting on this subject, because I've been down here reporting on this for years, along with a lot of other very intrepid journalists like Michael Yon and Oscar Blue Ramirez and Todd Bensman and Ben Berquam and all those guys that have come down here and have reported on this problem. Well, we finally got the word out enough that Panamanians started getting upset about it, and the presidential candidate, when he was a candidate, Jose Raul Molino, he campaigned on that. If I get elected, I'm going to close the Darien Gap, and I'm going to stop letting them in. Well, there's no way to actually close the Darien Gap, because it is a massive jungle with a swamp the size of Delaware, and Panama doesn't have enough policemen, period, to close off all of the potential ways people could come through there. But they didn't need to, because they have a choke point called Lago Bayano. There's a place where there's one bridge that gives access to the Darien area, the Darien region. And basically anybody that comes and goes out of the Darien has to come across that one bridge. And so they can just make a checkpoint on that bridge, and basically put a stop to anybody coming through illegally. So what they did was they just put out the word and said, if you come into Panama illegally, you will be deported from Panama back to your home country. So you will have just spent 6 days and put your life on the line to walk through the Darien Gap for nothing. And doing so essentially stopped the flow very quickly. So President Molino got elected on the backs of that promise. And that promise was a promise not just to help Panama, but to help America too. Because, you know, it's costly for the United States to have this massive conga line of migrants coming through Panama on the way to the U.S. And so Molino was doing us a favor. He wanted to do us a favor, but the Mayorkas administration wouldn't work with him on helping to pay for the flights to deport the people directly from Panama back to their home countries. They said they would, but they never actually did. Well, when Marco Rubio came here over the weekend, that was the third thing that they talked about, was that that Molino said, we want to deport all of the migrants that come into our country on their way to the United States so that they can't get to the United States illegally. And if you will help us, we will put this program into effect. And Rubio said, absolutely, let's do it. And so Rubio, before he left today, excuse me, before he left today, Rubio went to Albrook Airport in Panama City and watched the first repatriation flight full of Colombian illegals take off and go back to Colombia with some drug runners and human traffickers and prostitutes and criminals from Colombia that were here illegally. So yeah, this is the windy season in Panama. So it's weird because it doesn't like blow all the time. It blows really hard and then it stops blowing. So like right now, there's no wind at all. And then you'll just get these massive 30-mile-an-hour gusts, and then it'll calm down again. So it's crazy. Question, how analogous is Panama's government to the U.S.? What is the Panamanian government equivalency to the U.S. government? Very, very similar. Actually, when the invasion took place in 1989-90, after the invasion was over, the United States sent government lawyers, constitutional lawyers, to Panama to work with Panama on drafting a new constitution. And they drafted a constitution that is very similar to the U.S. Constitution with a couple of notable differences that I'll point out to you now, okay? And these are things that I love about the Panamanian Constitution. Number one, marriage in the Panamanian Constitution is codified as one man and one woman. In their constitution, it says marriage is between one man and one woman, and that's all. And so they would literally have to change their constitution to allow gay marriage. That, I think, is cool. Number two, the Panamanian Constitution guarantees the right for people to exercise their own religion. So everybody has the right to worship however they see fit, unless, this is what it says in the Constitution, unless it offends the Christian faith. So if you want to come here and practice Santeria, can't do it. You want to come here and put up a statue to the god Dagon or some weird thing like they do in schools now in the United States, can't do it. Because they learned from the American Constitution, they saw some of the problems that America was facing with things that were not made clear enough in the U.S. Constitution, intentionally or otherwise, and said, we want to avoid having those problems in our country because this is a country that's 90+% Christian, mostly Catholic, but Christian overall. And as a matter of fact, prayer is still required in schools here in Panama. It's not allowed in schools, it's required in schools. I went and visited the head of the education department, the education ministry in Panama years ago, and I loved what he told me in that interview. He said, you know what? we want to have a good education system. We want to have an education system that churns out people that are capable and competent and can compete in the world market. But the one thing that's most important to us has nothing to do with doctors and lawyers and engineers. We want to make people moral. We want to give them wisdom. And if we can give them wisdom and a good sense of morality, then whatever else we give them is gravy. Is just extra. And I thought, that is fantastic. So those are some of the things I like about the Panamanian Constitution. But like I say, the Panamanian Constitution does make it very clear that Panama and only Panama can run the Panama Canal. And so that again, the way the Chinese have found to sort of influence that is by trying to make Panama an economic vassal state. Does that make sense? And so when Donald Trump said, we're going to retake the Panama Canal, a lot of people were thinking, oh, they're going to send troops. We're going to parachute in again, just like I did back in 1989. Nope. I don't think that's what he meant. I hope that's not what he meant. But according to Marco Rubio, when Rubio came here, Rubio made it clear, okay, don't get your undies in a wad, folks. Let's sit down and talk about this. Here's the big deal. Here's the real problem that the United States has. The real problem they have is the loans that you're taking from China that are going to make you beholden to China if there is a conflict between us and them. And Panama went, oh, that's actually, you kind of have a point. Okay, well, we'll do what we can to unwind those. So to answer your question, somebody just asked, how can Panama pay back those loans and get out from under their thumb? You know, that may be part of a deal that has to take place with the United States. It is, you know, for what they're going to probably do is put out some of these construction projects that China has subsidized. Because the reason that China won all of these construction projects and the port management and all of that was not because China does a better job at it than the United States. There's a United States-run port here in Panama. There's 5 ports in Panama. 2 of them are run by China. 1 of them is run by the United States. Everybody here will tell you the one that's run by the United States is run so much better, so much more efficiently, so much more profitably than the one that's run by China. But what China did was they subsidized the bid that Hutchison made to, you know, handle the ports. And honestly, the United States didn't really care at the time, because at the time, Hutchison Whampoa was a British company that was based in Hong Kong, not a Chinese company. But it was bought out by a Chinese billionaire who has close ties to the CCP. That's when it started to become an issue. That's when it started to become a problem. So the way that China got these contracts was by, you know, going with Hutchison and subsidizing Hutchison to give a higher bid than anybody else in order to get it. Then after they got the bid, they started splitting hairs and finding little ways to get out of paying what they had agreed to pay. And there's a lot of talk in Panama about that, about how China doesn't live up to the commitments it makes. And I'll tell you, the Chinese in Panama are known for that. I'll give you an example of that. One of the reasons why we closed down our tour company was that we had an office that we rented in downtown, in this little town where I live. And we rented it from a Chinese family who owned the entire building. It had a supermarket in it and a restaurant and a little hotel and some offices, and I rented one of the offices. And of course, when you do a rental, you give a deposit, like a damage deposit, of 1 month's rent, and then you pay the first month's rent and you're in. When it's all said and done, when you're finished renting, then they come in and they inspect the place, and if you didn't tear it up, if it's left in good condition, then they return to you the damage deposit, right? That's the way it works. If you've ever rented an apartment, that's how it works. And that's what my contract said with this Chinese family. Well, when I had to close the company, we went down, we cleaned everything up, we repainted, we turned this place in, it was gleaming. It was in better condition than it was when I got it. And the Chinese family came in and they looked around and they said, okay, yeah, looks fine, no problem. And then, great, we left. And I didn't get my deposit back. And so I contacted them and said, hey, I'm still waiting for my deposit. And they said, oh, well, so about that deposit, what we're going to do is we're going to give you a credit in our stores to buy our products with that deposit rather than giving it back to you in cash. And I was like, no, I'd rather have it in cash. And they're like, yeah, we're not going to do that. And there was nothing in the contract that gave them the ability to go back on their word like that. But they did. And the problem is it's very difficult in Panama to sue anybody. And so they knew they could get away with it. And so I essentially just lost my deposit. And so, again, that's just a personal anecdote. But I've said this many times, and I don't mean to disparage Chinese people, but the Chinese government, the Chinese culture is very broken this way. I've always said that the national motto of China, if they had a national motto, it should be, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. And if you get caught, you're not trying hard enough. That should be the national anthem of China. Because China is known worldwide for low-cost products, for low-quality products. And I'll tell you that, you know, if somebody says to you, if you have a choice of buying a product and you can get that same product either made in Germany or made in China for the same price, which one would you consider? And people say, I'll pay more to get it from Germany. I'd rather not get it from China because I know it will be better made if it comes from Germany, right? And just so you understand, there's an even lower level of Chinese junk here in Panama that they can't sell in the United States, but that they offload on Panamanians. And Panamanians, like if in Panamanian slang, when they speak Spanish, if they have something that is broken, that breaks very quickly or that wears out too fast or whatever, they will describe it by saying that it's Chino. They'll say it's Chinese, even if it's not Chinese, even if it was made by their brother-in-law here in Panama. If it breaks the first time you use it, they'll go, oh, ese es Chino. They'll say, oh, this thing is so Chinese. Because in Panama, Chinese is synonymous with poor quality and bad business practices, okay? And so the Panamanians are actually, by and large, pretty happy about this deal that was made between Marco Rubio and President Molino. I had, when I was taking some video of the canal the other day, I was on this overlook and looking down at the canal and the building project where the Chinese company, that's the other thing the Belt and Road Initiative does, is they say, we will loan you the money to build that bridge. However, you have to employ Chinese labor to do it. So it has to be a Chinese company that comes to build the bridge. You can't hire Panamanians to build it, right? So that's the other part of their Belt and Road Initiative, right? So, woo, wind gust. So I was taking some video of that building project, and a Panamanian guy came over to me and he said, hey, just so you know, we love Americans. We want Americans to come to, you know, take the place of China here. We don't want to be under China's thumb. We know that if the Americans were building this bridge over here, it would be built a lot better, a lot faster, and we'd get a better deal, and it would last longer. So we're happy about all this. Thank you, Donald Trump. You know, that's what he said. So you will probably see some videos of some, not riots, but protests taking place in Panama City against Marco Rubio's visit and against Donald Trump. And let me just, so that you understand, that there is an organization here in Panama called Suntrax. And Suntrax is a straight up red communist organization. As a matter of fact, would not surprise me if they get some of their funding from China, because they are communist, okay? And every week, I kid you not, every week, somewhere in Panama City, there's a protest by Suntrax about something. That's what they do. They go out and they do protests. It's just professional protesting. These guys are probably getting paid to protest. Suntrax, like I said, I would almost guarantee you that they get money from China. And those are the guys that are out there protesting in the streets right now. Maybe a few other people, but most of the people you see protesting, if you look closely at the videos, you'll see the Panamanian flag, and then you'll see a red flag that says Suntrax on it. That is how you know that it is a Chinese, likely Chinese-funded agents provocateurs who are out there in the streets making a big deal about protesting. And of course, that's where CNN is going to go to show you the protests against Donald Trump. But they're not going to tell you that extra context that you need to know to understand it. You said they don't have any commodities in Panama. Wouldn't it be better for them to start, say, ag products to ship? Who? China? I'm not sure who you mean by that. Yeah, I'm sorry for the wind, folks. Like I said, it's not windy, and then it is windy. It's not windy, and then it is windy. But it was so beautiful today. I could have done this live indoors in my studio, but why? I mean, look at this. It's just so nice. Like, why would I not share this gorgeous outdoors with you? You know, that's what. Now, yeah, we have to put up with a little bit of wind on the microphone, but you guys can live with that. And so that's all I've got for today, folks. I just wanted to let you know that Marco Rubio came here. He came and he did a great job of translating Donald Trump's aggressive posture into something that is acceptable to Panama and is even seen as a win here. And so good on Marco Rubio for that. And kudos to President Trump for getting this stuff done, because he got something done. And while I personally am not for ever lying to get your way, and without a doubt, Donald Trump lied to get it to make this happen. Marco Rubio came down here and did a masterful job of translating Trump's intent into reality, and that's the important part, okay? So what's the temperature? It's about 80 degrees today up here, but with the breeze, it doesn't feel hot, and I'm standing in the shade, as you can see, so it's not bad. So if you don't have any other real quick questions, Panama does grow bananas. Yes, they do up in the out in the western part of the country in Chiriquí. If you ever heard of Chiriquí bananas, that's where they grow those. We have bananas in our yard. I mean, they grow all over the place out here, but they don't ship them out of Panama except from Chiriquí, as far as I know, which is up toward Costa Rica, up in the higher elevations. Where I am here is about almost 2,500 feet above sea level. And so what we love about this part of Panama is that it is not so tropical and steamy and buggy and hot. There's probably not many more bugs here than there are in West Virginia, where I have and it is about 75 degrees on average year round in our little valley here. We live in a volcanic crater. It's a safe, tranquil, peaceful place. And as you can see, very beautiful. So that's one of the reasons we love it. So, all right, everybody's asking, let's pray. So let's do that and we'll be done. Lord God, we come to you today and we just thank you for the art of diplomacy. We thank you that Marco Rubio was able to successfully accomplish things that would make both parties feel like they got a good deal out of this. And Lord, I do pray that Panama would not be under the thumb of China and other evil parties that would like to damage the United States or her interests or her allies. And Lord, so I pray that you would give our leaders wisdom. And Lord, you promised that righteousness exalts a nation. So I just pray that you would make us righteous, Lord. As we become more righteous, we'll become more exalted. And we would be that shining city on a hill for every country around the world for many years to come. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, folks, thank you very much for watching. God bless you. We'll see you next time. Take care.